Alright, so we are looking at 7th grade, Module 4. We're looking at Lesson 2. And we're going to go ahead and this is just going to be like a guide as to how to draw all those different shapes that we drew in Lesson 2. So I'm looking at the practice, which is on page 35. And I'm just going to run through these different types of pictures and geometric shapes that we're looking to draw. So number one, they simply just tell us to draw a trapezoid. Now they don't give me any other dimensions, so really we can draw whatever type of trapezoid we would like. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to give mine some dimensions. So the very first thing I like to start off with is, usually I always start on the base of my shapes. So on this particular shape, this trapezoid, I'm going to go ahead and make a 4 centimeter base. So my ruler is slightly different than the ones we have in class. Mine's a little bit further to the end. So we're going to be looking at our 0 here. We're going to start our line at 0, and I'm going to go ahead and go over to the tick mark on top of the 4, the longer tick mark. So precision is very important when we're drawing these geometric figures, especially when the book starts to tell us exactly how long they want certain lines and angles and such. So as you can see here, I just went ahead and drew me a line. It goes from 0 to 4. That is my 4 centimeter line right here. So I'm going to go ahead and label that as a 4 centimeter line. Now, to be able to draw a trapezoid, you have to know the definition of a trapezoid. And a trapezoid is two parallel lines, typically the top and the bottom are both parallel, and then the two sides are not going to be parallel. They're going to eventually, if the lines go on forever, they're going to touch. So I use my ruler to go ahead and draw that base. The next thing I need to be able to create is a parallel line up here at the top. So in order to be able to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use my set square. So here's my set square. I have a 90-degree angle on this set square that you can see here. I'm going to line my set square up with my base so that it is even. And then once it is even, I'm going to hold that set square down, take my straight edge on my ruler, and line it up along the left-hand side here. So let's see if I can get my light a little bit better. And then I'm going to go ahead and slide my set square up to where I want my parallel line to be. And this looks like a good enough spot for me, so I'm holding the ruler down with my middle finger and my thumb on my left hand. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my index finger on my left hand to hold that set square down. And then I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple of tick marks along the bottom of my set square. This is going to show me where my parallel line is. And I do 2 tick marks so that I can go ahead and line up. I'm going to rotate my paper here and line up with my ruler those 2 tick marks that I created, so that I know that these 2 lines, once I connect them, are going to create a line that is parallel to my line down here at the bottom of my base. So this line is parallel to this line. To show that, we can put a notation. It's a little arrow right here. I'm going to put 1 arrow on that one, and I'll put 1 arrow on the bottom, and that lets the reader know, hey, these 2 lines right here, I made sure that they were parallel. I went ahead and did that with a set square. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler. I'm going to put my pencil onto the, still trying to get my lighting right. I'm going to take my pencil and put my pencil on the very edge of one of my lines, either the top or the bottom. I'm choosing the top. I'm going to set my ruler up against it and line my ruler up so that I get the very edge of my bottom line here. And I'm going to go ahead and connect those 2 lines, creating the side of my trapezoid. Do the same thing to the other side. And we have a completed trapezoid with our correct markings on here. These 2 lines are not parallel, so I will not put any markings on those. So that is our first one. That is our trapezoid. The second one in the practice just says to draw a parallelogram. So the easiest way to draw a parallelogram is to have a base and a top that is the same size, because if you make them both the same length, that means that your two lines on the sides will also be parallel. Or you can use a set square and then you have to measure out all of your sides and make sure that they're all parallel. But it's way easier just to make sure that your lines are the same length. So just like we did 4 centimeters over 4 centimeters on the first one, I'm going to go ahead and do another 4 centimeter line. So here's my 4 centimeter line. And I'm going to go ahead and label that is 4 centimeters. And then taking my set square just like I did before, I'm going to go ahead and line that set square up with my base. Take my ruler and set that up on the side. If my set square stops moving, I'm going to hold that ruler down, slide my set square up to where I want the top part of my parallelogram to be, and again make those 2 tick marks. So there are my 2 tick marks. Now typically your parallelogram top is going to be a little further to the right on most that we see. So I'm not going to start it right on top right here. I'm going to start it right here where this tick mark is and go this way 4 centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 0 on that first tick mark because that's a good place for me to start it at. And I'm going to go ahead and make that 4 centimeter line here, using that second tick mark as a guide. And there's my slightly longer than 4 centimeters. Let me erase a little bit here and adjust. So I'm going to remeasure. I went 1 tick mark too far, it looked like. So there is a 4 centimeter line. So these 2 lines are parallel. So I'm going to go ahead and put my parallel notation. They're also both 4 centimeters. So if they're both the same length, I'm going to go ahead and put this little marking, which shows that both of those lines are also the same length. And now, just like the trapezoid, I can go ahead and do the 2 sides. So line up my ends with my ruler, create that side, do the same thing on the right side, and create that side. Now, for this to be a parallelogram, the definition of a parallelogram is that this side is parallel to this side, and this side should also be parallel to this side. So let's make sure that I have the correct things going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate my paper, and I'm going to use my set square to line it up with my left side. So there we have it lined up. I'm going to use my ruler up against the side like I always do when I use a set square. And I'm going to slide that up and make sure that the bottom of my set square lines up with the other side. And if you can see, if my finger isn't in the way, that line does line up with the bottom of my set square right here. So I know that these 2 lines are also parallel. So I'm going to put notation that these are parallel lines. Now if I just leave it with 1 arrow, that's going to mean that this line's parallel to this one. And it's obviously not, because they cross right here. So to show that this is a different parallel line than these 2, I'm going to go ahead and put a second arrow. So the 2 lines with 2 arrows are parallel to each other, and the lines with 1 arrow are parallel to each other. Also, these lines should also be the same length. So if I measure these lines, this one is 3 centimeters long, and this one is also 3 centimeters long. So I can show that they're the same length by doing the same thing we had with the 4. But these aren't 4 centimeters, because if I only leave it with 1 notch, that's going to mean that this is 4 centimeters, and this is 4 centimeters, and this is 4 centimeters, which it isn't. This is 3 centimeters, so I'm going to put 2 notches to show that it's different than the 4 centimeter. I can also write down here that it's 3 centimeters, so that if someone was coming and looking at my picture, they could say, oh, these 2 lines are parallel, and they're both 4 centimeters, because this one's 4 centimeters, so this one's 4 centimeters. And then these 2 lines, based off of these 2 things, are parallel to each other. And if this one's 3 centimeters and it got 2 notches, this one's 3 centimeters because it has 2 notches as well. So that is number 2, drawing a parallelogram. Next one we're going to look at is number 3, obviously. So number 3 tells us to draw a rectangle. It doesn't give us any information about the rectangle. It just says to draw a rectangle. So, just like before, I think I'm going to stick to the 4 centimeter thing. Rectangles, as you should know, that the base of a rectangle is equal to the length of its opposite side, along with the left side is equal to its opposite, the right side, and every angle on a rectangle is a right angle. So those are the most important things that we need to do for our rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with a 4 centimeter line, just like all the rest. Like 4 centimeters, a nice easy number to remember. So here's a 4 centimeter line. Okay, and a rectangle is really just a parallelogram that has right angles. So the only difference that we're really doing, I'm not necessarily going to use a set square on this. I'm actually going to go ahead and take out my protractor. Now this protractor looks a bit different than the ones we have at school, but this is the only one I had at home. So it's basically the same principle. All of our protractors, if you look at the one at school, pause my video, my dog's about to start barking. So my protractor, just like any protractor that we have at school, has a hole or a dot somewhere in the center, closer to the bottom, with a line on either side of that hole. So we need to take the hole or circle and line it up with the edge of our left hand side line that we just created, and then take that black line and line it up with our actual base, and we are creating a 90-degree angle. So you go up here to the top at 90 tick mark and make a small notch, go over to the right hand side and do the same thing. So here are our 2 90-degree notches, if you can see that in the video. And to make a rectangle, our sides can't be the same as a base of our base, because if these were 4 centimeters, this would be a square rather than a rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and make my lines be 3 centimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler, and on the base I'm going to line it up with the, well, I'll just go ahead and create a line for right now, make it easy. So I'm just going to make a long line. It's longer than 3 centimeters. Do the same thing over here. But if I want my sides to be 3 centimeters, I can go ahead and measure that off. Put a tick mark between the 0 and the 3, just like you see here. And then do the same thing with the other side. Putting that tick mark. So that's where 3 centimeters is, and I can go ahead and label that 3 centimeter. And then connect those 2 tick marks, creating the top of my rectangle. Now these extra markings on the paper, on the diagram, are no problem. We can leave those. Now we can go ahead and put our notations, just like our parallelogram we had here. This line is parallel to our bottom. It's also the same length. And then our right side is parallel only to the left side. And it is also 3 inches. So we're going to put our 2 tick marks. And then we can make a note that this is a right angle, this is a right angle. If you check these 2 with your protractor, you will notice that if you did everything correctly, that you can see that these are also right angles. So this one is a right angle. I'll spin my paper around, line up my point with that vertex, and make sure that my lines are even you can see that that line is also at the 90 degrees. So this is also a 90-degree angle, creating a proper rectangle. For number 4, it says to draw a square, and you would do the same exact process, except instead of making this line 3 centimeters, you would make it 4 centimeters, so that all sides would be 4 centimeters. Then instead of putting 2 tick marks on every side, everything else would stay the same. But rather than doing 2 tick marks, everything would have 1 tick mark, because every last one of them would be 4 centimeters. And that's the only difference with a square. So here is my square. I went ahead and created my base the same we did on the rectangle. This is 4 centimeters. Then I went ahead and made my 90-degree angles. So this is a 90 and this is a 90 that I made sure to create. And I went ahead and drew lines, measured these lines, and put tick marks at 4 centimeters. And then once I put those tick marks, I made my top, which if you measure it is also 4 centimeters. And just like the rectangle, this is a 90 and this is a 90. So putting my markings on it, this is parallel to this. This right side is not parallel to the top or the bottom, but it is parallel to the left side. And what makes this a square is all sides are equal. So this side gets one marking, this side gets 1 tick mark because it's also 4 centimeters. This is 4 centimeters and this is 4 centimeters. So like I said, that is the difference between a square and a rectangle, but they are drawn the same way. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into some problems where they want us to draw a figure like the ones that we already drew. So you'll see that it's the same process, but now they give us some criteria to go by. So for number 6 says to draw a trapezoid that has a height of 4 centimeters. So we want a height of 4 centimeters on our trapezoid. I'm going to go ahead and do the same type of trapezoid that we did in number 1. It tells me that I need a height of 4 centimeters, but it doesn't tell me anything about my base. So I'm going to go ahead and stick to that 4 centimeter base. So I'm going to go ahead and make my first baseline be 4 centimeters. So this is 4 centimeters. Now this one's going to be, I can't just go ahead and draw a top line because I don't know exactly where 4 centimeters is. So I first need to make my height on this one, because that's the stipulation that they give me, is I have to have a height of 4 centimeters. And if you remember in 6th grade when we were drawing triangles and finding the area of triangles, it was the height had to be a 90-degree angle out of the base, which means I need to create a 90-degree angle. So somewhere in the middle of my base here, I'm going to put a point, and then using my protractor, I'm going to go ahead and line my center point up with that point and line my lines up on both sides. So I'm lining my lines up here and here. And I'm going to go ahead and put a tick mark at 90 degrees. And that is going to be my height. I'm going to go ahead and make that height be 4 centimeters long. So I'm going to turn my paper, put my 0 on my base, line it up with that 90-degree tick mark, and then draw a 4 centimeter height. So going from the base at 0 to the 4, that height is now 4 centimeters. And this is a 90-degree angle. Now the only thing I need to do now is just like we did with the trapezoid. I'm going to use my set square to make a parallel line right up here at the top at this top line. So taking my set square, lining it up with my base, holding it still while grabbing my ruler, lining that up on the side, and then sliding my set square up until I get even with the top of that 4 centimeter height. So right here. Then I'm going to hold that set square down and go ahead and put a couple of tick marks, just like before, like that. And then we have our tick marks. And I'm just going to go ahead and make another line. Doesn't matter if it's shorter or longer. I'm going to go ahead and make this one longer. I try to make it a different size than my base. That way I don't end up with some type of rectangle. And then I can go ahead and connect my corners. So here's my left side. Here is my right side. And there is my completed trapezoid without my markings. If I go ahead and put my markings, this side top is parallel to the bottom. These two sides are definitely not parallel whatsoever, so we leave that alone. And that is all we need to do for number 6. Number 7 wants us to construct a rectangle, just like we did for number 3. But now they tell us that they want side lengths of 2 inches and 3 inches. Now it doesn't matter whether you make the base be 2 inches or you make the base be 3 inches, because as long as you make them 1, 3, 1, 2, it doesn't matter which one you try. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with a base of 3 inches. That's just my personal preference. So I'm going to go ahead and start at 0, make my line be from 0 all the way to 3. So make sure you're using the inches part of your ruler. Don't mess it up with centimeters. So here's a 3-inch line. And I'm going to go ahead and write down that that is 3 inches. And just like my other rectangle, I need to make sure that my corners, my vertices, are 90-degree angles. So I'm going to take my protractor, get it on that corner, line up my line, and put a tick mark at my 90. And do the same thing for the right hand vertex. Put a tick mark at 90. Those are my tick marks. Now I'm going to go ahead and construct some lines that go from my bottom all the way up to that tick mark. Make them kind of long. The longer the better when you're drawing these, because it's kind of like showing me your work. If you make a long line and then put tick marks and you leave all that extra like we did for number 3 and number 4, it's like showing your work on a regular test. So now, here are my 90-degree angles. I'm going to go ahead and make those markings like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and measure off my 2 inches. So again, using my ruler, I'm going to go ahead and put a tick mark at 2 inches because I already have my 3. And then coming down to the other line, measuring that one off at 2 inches. And I can go ahead and connect those 2 tick marks, and that is going to create the top of my rectangle. So here's my rectangle with a side of 3 inches and another side of 2 inches. And then if I put my markings, this line is parallel to this line. My right side is not parallel to those two, but it is parallel to the left side. This side is 2 inches and this side is 2 inches, so 1 tick mark. This side is 3 inches and it goes along with this side. And then these 2 angles are also 90s. So there is a completed rectangle. And number 8 square would also be done the same way. So it's done the same exact way for number 8, except you use side lengths of 2.5 inches. Moving right along, we're going to take a look at number 9, and that'll be the last one we do. Number 9 says to construct a parallelogram, much like we did for number 2, except now they tell us they want side lengths of 4 centimeters and 6 centimeters, and then they want 2 angles that measure 50 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and take the longest side first. I'm going to go ahead and draw that 6 centimeter line. as my base. So here is a 6 centimeter line. I'm going to make that note. And then they want an angle of 50 degrees. And actually with this particular base, what I'm going to do, because I have to make those angles, I'm going to make it a tad bit longer. But I'm going to put a tick mark at the 6 so that I can put a point there, because I'm going to be creating an angle out of that, a 50 degree angle. So if you look at the parallelogram, this is a 50 degree angle. This is an angle, and we're going to be putting our 50 degree angle here. And then on the other side, with that line that I extended, we're going to make this one also a 50 degree angle, because both of those lines have to be at the same angle coming off so that they can be parallel. So that's what we're working on with this one, except they're giving us the measurements. So using our protractor, I'm going to come to the left hand side and line that side up. I'm opening, this angle is opening up to the right hand side, so I need to find the 50 on the bottom scale, not the top scale. Top scales are for left handed side angles. And I'm going to put a tick mark at that 50 degree marking. I'm going to come over here to the point that I have here, and I'm going to do the same exact tick mark, same 50 degree angle. So going right back here to that 50 and putting a tick mark there. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect each corner with that tick mark. And I'm just going to create a rather long line. So putting my pencil on that corner, lining it up with a tick mark, and drawing that line, doing the same thing over here. So now the stipulations on this parallelogram was to have 2 sides be 6 centimeters and 2 sides be 4 centimeters. So this one and my top will be 6. So I need these two to be 4. So I'm going to go ahead and use my ruler and put my 0 down here in the corner, line that line up, put a tick mark at the 4. So that lets me know that this is 4 centimeters. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Put a tick mark at the 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect those 2 tick marks, making my top line. So then we have our parallelogram. You can use your set square to check to make sure that these 2 lines are parallel. And then we can go ahead and do our markings. So this line is parallel to this one. It's also the same length. And this line is parallel to the right side. And they are also the same length.